Hello, everybody. This is Ahmed Tharwat, the host of Ahmedia. This is Wednesday, last day of January. My goodness, sunny, 40 some outside. Today we're gonna be talking about the American again gearing up for another war in the Middle East. This time. With Iran, we've done Syria, Afghanistan early on, Iraq, Libya, gone, Houthi in Yemen, Gaza destroyed, American weapons, assassination in West Bank by state terrorists. In Israel, and people will say, well, Israelis troops stormed the hospital in West Bank and killed 3 militants. What a freaking racist, misleading, a Zionist mouthpiece of BBC and the rest of the media. Terrorists, Israelis, attacked the hospital in Gaza and West Bank and killed 3 patients. That's how the news should be phrased. We don't know who those people are. You decided they are terrorists. You decided they are Hamas militant. There is no due process. You just go and create your own laws and your own justification. Today we're going to talk to Professor William Beeman. He's a retired professor now. He used to be in Department of Anthropology at the University of Minnesota, and now he's enjoying his retirement in California. He had the book, The Great Satan versus the Mad Mullah, How the United States and Iran Demonize Each Other. Very good. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. How about you?
Well, I'm still here. He's still here. It's a tough.
I think I'll take off my glasses. I think there's a glare on my glasses.
Yes, that's good. You look good. You look good. You are in California, I believe. But I'm interested in what's going on now in as far as Iran. Now Iran been accused of all sorts of things, and it is deja vu again, really, the mad mullah again is the rhetoric. And you read your book, The Great Satan and Mad Mullah, and you draw from your experience as a linguist and an anthropologist about how people in power control the narrative by using religious reference and stereotype from history and reference to galvanize their own people. You make the comparison between the two countries as they all equal. You're talking about Iran, they can even feed their own countries. Their damage is limited, but the great Satan is an empire. And they know what they're doing, and they have no resources. So how do you really make this comparison in a such a way that it is between two equals?
Well, I think that it's really important for us to go back in history and take a look at the relationship between the United States and Iran. And it's not just in the United States and Iran, but also in general, European colonial forces and Iran. Iran has been deeply suspicious of the motives of European colonial powers, particularly Great Britain, but also Russia, and to a lesser extent France, since the 19th century. And after World War II, the United States more or less took over the role of Great Britain in the region in affecting Iran's internal politics. And this was the cause of the the 1978-1979 revolution. The Iranian revolution was based on a belief that the Shah was controlled entirely by the United States and by United States economic interests, and not the interests of the Iranian people. And so when the revolution took place in 1978, 1979, this was the dominant narrative in Iran, that the United States and its principal ally in the Middle East, namely Israel, were trying to dominate the region in the way that Great Britain had dominated the region after World War One. So this narrative is the core narrative for the Iranian Revolution and for the ongoing government of Iran, which considers itself still to be engaged in Islamic revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the mistake that I think that analysts make in the United States is to believe that somehow the other groups in the Middle East who also oppose colonial influence in the region are somehow have somehow been created by Iran and are totally controlled by Iran. This is just simply false. These other groups have their own agendas, they have their own history, they have their own origins, and they have their own reasons for opposing both the United States and Israel. And it happens that Iran has made common cause with these organizations and has provided some support for them. If you'd like, we can go through them one at a time.
No, this is really interesting because, yeah, this is oversimplification that Hezbollah run by Iranian or Hezbollah in Iraq run by this, and supporting Hamas. That's Hamas. I mean, and it's not connecting to the reality, the reality on the ground with the occupation of the Zionist state and apartheid state and refugee, and that is the reality there that really form the Palestinian resistance, not the Iranian. And but you used a lot of when you compare what the Iranians say about the American, the great Satan, and they use religious references to give it, to get the narrative resonate with their own people. And then the American use the mad mullah, the savage, the extremist, the terrorist. It seems to me the Iranian use a lot, use from this reservoir of religious of first, and the American use the demonization of the American really based on a bigger narrative with a racist narrative. And the Iranian, narrative is really based on a religious one. I mean, when we always accuse anybody, challenge the American is savage, is terrorist, animals.
Every political posture has to try to attract public sentiment. And so so the Iranian society or the Iranian government, in opposing American influence in the region, has to use symbolism that will resonate with the Iranian people. And for the Iranian people who are Shia Muslims, the idea of an evil external oppressor who is anti-religious is symbolism that is going to work to convince a lot of the Iranian population that the government's opposition to the United States has a religious sanction, that it's a kind of virtuous opposition. And for the United States, the same thing is true. the idea that you have a group of extremists that are irrational and that are willing to attack anybody and are just simply, just simply killing people for no reason whatever, is something that resonates with the American people, who are inclined to believe, unfortunately, inclined to believe that people from the Middle East are, not like Europeans. They're not rational people. They're
They're mad.
unhinged,
They're mad and angry.
they're unhinged and crazy. And so, this is the basis for the United States accusing Iran of building nuclear weapons, which has absolutely no basis in fact. Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program, but for the American public, the idea that you have crazy, extreme religious people who are willing to drop bombs just because they're evil and mean, is something that a lot of people in the United States are going to believe, and it's very unfortunate. It's very prejudicial. But on the other hand, the Iranian characterization of the United States as anti-religionist is also a form of prejudice that is directed toward the U.S. So both sides are using a kind of propagandistic rhetoric in order to be able to make the other side look evil. The irony, however, is that in Iran itself, the population of Iran is actually very well disposed toward the United States. They have a very positive view of the United States. It's only the Iranian leadership that it manages to make this picture of the United States successful among about 25% of the population, I would say.
In your book, you talked about each camp has its own myth, and they draw its own image. I think you alluded to some of that. Is there a particular myth that the Iranian have about the American, or vice versa, or a particular images that you haven't mentioned yet?
Well, yes. Again, the Iranian myth about the United States is that the United States is doing everything possible to control internal affairs in Iran, and are going to continue to try to interfere with internal affairs in Iran. And if the United States doesn't do it directly, then their proxy is going to do it, and that is Israel. And certainly Israel has had spies infiltrate Iran. They made attacks and assassinations on Iranian officials. And so, in the Iranian narrative, the United States and Israel are the same, the same force. They're the same factor. And so, when an attack or an assassination takes place within Iran, or destruction of some Iranian facility within Iran that may have taken place by Israel or by people who infiltrated the country, the United States is immediately blamed. And I should point out, it's not just Israel, by the way. We also have several Iranian opposition groups that date from the time of the revolution, that have been supported by right-wing politicians in the United States, and that those groups also are considered to be extensions of U.S. foreign policy. So Iran believes that it's justified in opposing U.S. influence in the region, because they consider the United States eventually to be an existential threat to Iran and to the Iranian government, and especially to the ideals of the Iranian Revolution.
About the other way, the myth that the American had about the Iranian.
and the United States, of course, the United States has been wedded to essentially a two-power model of the world for a long time. But after World War II, the two-power model of the world, that is the United States versus the Soviet Union, collapsed when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1989, and the United States just couldn't get rid of this model. So the idea that there had to be a force in the world that was going to oppose the United States continues to dominate in our narrative. And so here we have Iran conveniently opposed to the United States. And so if you take a look at the newspaper, just about anything that happens in the Middle East, the headline says Iranian-backed whatever opposes American forces, ignoring the fact that groups like Hamas or the Houthis, the Ansar Allah in Yemen, or Hezbollah, have their own agenda. They have their own reasons for doing what they do. And it may be that Iran provides some financial support, but Iran does not control these groups. And the idea that when the New York Times headline, by the way, dominated by the analyst David Sanger, who has been opposed to Iran for forever, really. He never misses a chance to try to blame Iran for anything. But he is their primary analyst for the Middle East. You end up with headlines that say that just about anything that happens that's negative with regard to American power in the Middle East is somehow Iranian backed or Iranian sponsored, and that's just simply not true. Iran is not directing these actions.
Chapter 8 and 9, you talk about the sins of the United States. What
Yes.
they committed sins, and the
Yes.
Iranians also committing sins. Are they any different than what you alluded to about the?
Both sides have committed sins in the
We're playing God now. You
Yes,
guys.
that's right. But
So what kind of sins?
The ultimate, the American sin was the exploitation of Iran after World War II, the establishment of the Shah, and the establishment of essentially neo-colonial rule in Iran after World War II and until the Iranian Revolution of 1978, 1979. From the United States standpoint, the apical, the most important event to accuse Iranians of a sin was the occupation of the U.S. embassy in November of 1979.
Or hostage crisis, whatever.
The hostage crisis. The hostage crisis is something that has been so it has been so emotionally potent in U.S. foreign policy circles that it probably will never be erased in people's memory, and at least until the people who were involved with that, pass away, because they are obsessed with this, absolutely obsessed.
It's like what the Israelis doing in Gaza now, obsessed with hostage.
And we forget that after the Iranian Revolution, in February of 1979, when Khomeini came to power, the United States actually had about 6 months of rather good relations with Iran. It was a time when the official government of Iran were secular nationalists. They were not religion, and they're not religionists.
No.
So for about 6 months, the United States was trying to reestablish diplomatic relations and political relations with Iran, and they were quite successful. And the hostage crisis was triggered by the Jimmy Carter allowing the Shah to enter the United States for medical treatment. and then not allowing Iranian doctors to actually determine whether he really was sick, because he had kept his cancer a secret from the Iranian people and from everybody else. And the Iranians remembered 1952 when the U.S. CIA overthrew the government of Mohammad Mossadegh.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they thought was that the Shah was being admitted to the United States, and that the United States was going to plan another coup against the revolution and against Iran. And so the occupation of the embassy for more than a year, 444 days, was such a potent and important an important event for the Iranian narrative about the evils of the United States, but also on the side of the United States, the most important offense that the Iranians had directed toward the United States.
What kind of conflicts between the Iranian and the American now? How is it different than 50 years ago?
Well, in the United States, we don't hear about Iranian accusations of U.S. Actions directed toward them. But one of the most important ones was during the Iran-Iraq War. The Iran-Iraq War went on for 8 years between 1980 and 1988, and the United States kept saying that they were neutral in this war, but in fact they favored Saddam Hussein. It's really kind of crazy because
a lot of people don't know that,
because we actually again overthrew Saddam Hussein under the George W. Bush administration. But from 1980 to 1988, the United States actually supported Saddam Hussein in the war against Iran. Iranians would have won the war against Iraq if the United States had not supported the Iraqis. And the reason they supported the Iraqis is that the United States did not want Iran to be strong. They didn't want Iran to actually have a victory.
Well, they don't want anybody to be strong. I mean, if somebody else is strong, they're going to support the Iranian against that. They did that in Afghanistan. So I don't think it's a clear cut. There are our Mad Mullah or our Satan. They managed somehow to work together in Syria and Afghanistan.
Yes, that's correct. Iran continually actually many times made overtures to the United States to help it in Afghanistan, in dealing with Syria, and certainly in opposing Saddam Hussein. But then we had, under George W. Bush, we had this very famous speech where George Bush came out with the idea of the axis of evil. And after Iran had specifically condemned the events of September 11th, 2001, the attack on the World Trade Towers and Washington, and also the plane in
Pentagon.
In Pennsylvania. The United States then George Bush came out with this idea that Iran was part of the axis of evil with North Korea, and the Iranians were deeply offended because they had in fact expressed support for the United States against these
terrorists.
Terrible tragedy. From the Iranian standpoint, the United States has not been very friendly to Iran. And then immediately after the United States invaded Iraq, the United States started accusing Iran of building nuclear weapons, when this was just simply not true. the United States had been supporting the Iranian nuclear industry since the Eisenhower administration, since the 1950s. And we knew perfectly well that what Iran's nuclear industry consisted of. It was largely for peaceful purposes. And the United States tried to, in fact, sell nuclear power plants to Iran, all for decades. But under the Bush administration, the United States wanted a pretext for attacking Iran and were explicit about saying they wanted regime change. And so the only way to convince the American public that that it was okay for the United States to engage in this kind of regime change was to accuse Iran of something terrible, and that was nuclear weapons. It's now been 20 years since the United States first accused Iran of making nuclear weapons. And in fact, this goes back to the Reagan administration. In 1990, the Reagan administration said Iran is 6 months away from making a nuclear weapon. So now how many years is that? It's 30 years. They've been saying that Iran is 6 months away from making a nuclear weapan.
Reagan never was good on math.
And it has never happened. And the Iran doesn't have enough uranium to make even one nuclear weapon. And if they made one nuclear weapon, they'd have to test it, and then they would have no nuclear weapons. So it is really an absurdity that we keep using this excuse to try to demonize Iran. Now, I'm not saying that Iran has never done anything. I'd like to take these three principal groups and quickly explain to your listeners, your viewers, about them. Hamas is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, and it arose during the Intifada in 1987. In the Palestinian Intifada in 1987, it rose independently. Iran did not create it. And this is something that you will hear from rather ignorant people or people who wanted to.
And it was supported by the Israelis. Netanyahu was a big
yes, and Hamas was supported by Israel because they saw Hamas as an opposition to Fatah,
the more secular Palestinian
right.
liberation movement.
And they thought that Hamas was small and not very powerful, and but it could erode the Palestinian support for Fatah, and erode support for the two-state solution. And then I guess the thinking was in Israel that once Fatah had been eliminated and the possibility of a two-state solution had been eliminated, that Hamas would be easy to take care of. But you yourself, you're Egyptian, so you know about the Muslim Brotherhood.
Hamas is the only Arab entity they were actually elected.
Yes, that's correct. Also correct.
Yeah.
But the Muslim Brotherhood goes back to 1875.
Yeah.
Hezbollah arose in 1980, just after the Iranian Revolution. And the reason it arose is because Lebanon, which is an artificially created state created by the French, it has three major populations. They have a Christian population, the Maronite Christians. They have a Sunni population, and they have a Shia population. The Shia population is a plurality in Lebanon, and they live in the southern part of the country. After World War II, and then again after the 1967 Israel-Palestinian War, the 7 Days War, refugees from Palestine were resettled all throughout the Arab world. They were resettled in Gaza, in Syria, in Jordan, on the West Bank, and also in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon. The Palestinians settled in southern Lebanon were, of course, opposed to Israel. They were pretty upset about the 7 Days War and about their dislocation. So they began to attack Israel from Lebanese territory. Now, the Shia in southern Lebanon did not really like them. They didn't really want the Palestinians there because they were the Palestinians, although UNRWA and other organizations provided health and education for the Palestinians, they did not provide employment. And so they were competing for economic resources with the Shia that were in southern Lebanon. So Israel started attacking the Palestinian refugee camps in southern Lebanon and indiscriminately started bombing the Shia community as well. And the Shia community called to Beirut, to the Maronite Christians who dominated the state, and said, please come send the Lebanese army to defend us against Israel. They didn't do it. The Lebanese army never entered southern Lebanon, never defended the Shia population there. So the Shia went to Iran and they said, help us. We're your Shia brothers and we are being attacked by Israel. And then Iran had just, the revolution had just started and Iran was looking for a way to export its revolution. So yeah, they came to southern Lebanon and they trained them. And that's how Hezbollah started.
Because we have a few minutes left, what's the third one?
The third one is the Houthis. The Houthis are Zaidi Shia Muslims, and they were the dominant political force for almost 9 centuries in Yemen. But after the reunification of northern and southern Yemen, they suddenly became a minority. The Houthis have been around since 1990. So they, as a Zaidi revival movement, again, the Zaidi community in having political control over Yemen. They're religious. They do have a religious posture, but once again, people use religion in order to justify political gain or
exactly
political objectives.
Okay, well, this is really a great conversation. Professor William Beeman, he's a retired professor now. He used to be in Department of Anthropology at the University of Minnesota, and now he's enjoying his retirement in California. There's not a lot of anthropology going on in California.
Oh, come on.
Everywhere you go, huh?
There are anthropologists everywhere. And
is there such thing that we can say urban anthropology, modern one? I don't know. I don't want to get into that. We don't even have the time. But I thank you so much for your time. Enjoy your trip. I know you're traveling soon, and we'll be talking to you when you come back.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm always pleased to have a chance to talk to you, and my greetings to all of my friends in Minnesota.